Hello, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to today's webinar, which is on the subject of innovations in public works, rethinking public works for jobs and skills in a changing world. This is the third in a series of webinars that's looking at the role of public works in a changing geopolitical and climate context and trying to look at some of the lessons that we can draw out for the future. And each of these webinars is based on a new publication. First of all, we had one from the ILO, which looked at the relationship between employment creation and public works programs and how to resolve some of the issues that arise from these two different sets of objectives. The second one was a recent ODI Spark paper, which looked at the whole question of the evaluation of assets created through public works programs and raised some interesting questions about what we know about the impact of assets, what we don't know about the impact, and what the implications are for policy and program design. And then today we have a new paper, which has just been published by the World Bank that we'll be exploring together. And each of these publications critically examines the issues relating to policy, design, political economy, evaluation, impact, and innovation. And these webinars are really an opportunity to learn about some of the new things that are happening in the sector and look at some of the kind of challenges that public works have to address if they're going to carry on playing a significant role in a very much a changing context, where we have to respond to geopolitical disruption, macroeconomic challenges, and of course, environmental issues. Next slide, please. So today, I am delighted to welcome our World Bank colleagues and colleagues from Malawi, Rwanda, and Sierra Leone to discuss a new paper which really looks at how we can develop new kinds of public works programs, moving away from the traditional focus on infrastructure to exploring the role of public works in relation to digital innovations, in relation to the care economy, and also in relation to climate challenges. So I'm delighted that we have bank colleagues here to present these things. But before we start, let me give an introduction to the people that you'll be hearing from. First of all, may I introduce myself? My name is Anna McCord, and I've been working on public works for the last 20, 30 years or so, and was delighted to be involved in the production of this report by the bank. Next slide, please. So I'll be your moderator today. And I'd like to just tell you a few things about the session. And if you're new to socialprotection.org webinars, I think it's important that you know this information. The first is that the session is being recorded. And along with the presentation, it will be available on the socialprotection.org website. And if you haven't joined socialprotection.org, I would urge you to, because there's a wealth of excellent materials there, including the presentations and recordings of the previous sessions in this series. But also, if you are registered for this session, you will receive the recording and the presentations. They will be sent to you in the coming weeks by sp.org. And we'd like to thank sp.org very much for the excellent service they provide and for facilitating this information exchange. In terms of the webinar itself, the practicalities, sorry, could we go back to the previous slide? In terms of the practicalities, I'd like to tell you that Zoom AI generates automatic captions. And if you'd like to see these in English, click on the button marked CC at the bottom of the screen, closed captions, and that will give you live captioning of the discussion. In terms of yourselves, I'd like to invite you to use the chat box. The access to the chat box is again on the bar at the bottom of the screen. Please use that to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, where you're coming from, what your job is. You can make comments throughout the presentations and also share useful links, documents you've produced or documents that you think are relevant to the discussion and might be of interest to other participants. And finally, we would love you to participate in this session. Now, the way it's set up, you can't directly communicate. There's no ability to ask your questions directly through your voice, but you can interact and ask your questions through the Q&A box. And we'd like to invite you to please do put questions in the Q&A box as they occur to you as you listen to the various presentations. And what we'd ask is, please, can you give your name, the organisation that you're working for, and also could you specify who you would like to answer the question, because we have a number of speakers here today, people from the bank, people from national governments, and it would be very helpful to us if you could indicate who you would like to answer your question. And we will be reminding you of this throughout the session. Often people get mixed up and they might well put questions in the chat box, and we'll try to capture them if they go in there, but really it would be very helpful if you could put them in the Q&A box. Okay, next slide, please. So the structure today is that we are going to hear some opening remarks from Christian Bodewig, who is the new practice manager for the social protection and labour global engagement in the World Bank. So he will be introducing the session, first of all, after I finish this introduction. And then we will have a formal presentation from Michael Webber, who is the senior economist in the World Bank Group, who has actually been working on this initiative since it started several years ago now, I think, Michael, and is one of the editors of the paper. So Michael will then present. And then after that, we will have three speakers, and I'm delighted that we have Maurice Nsibabaruta, who is working on the Public Works Programme in Rwanda, Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr, OBE, who is the Mayor of Freetown, who has also been working on public works programmes there, and Kate Jane Langwe, Director of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs in Malawi. And each of our three, this should say panelists rather than the speakers, each of our three panelists will be giving comments and discussing their own experiences in the areas of digital, green and care public works programmes. So I think I'd like to end it there. I think do we have one more slide? Yes, we also have additional speakers who will be on hand to provide inputs and answer questions. There's Marko Vucic, a consultant with the World Bank Group, Alessandra Heinemann, Senior Social Protection Specialist in the Bank Group, Jonathan Malte-Paul Stottero, economist in the bank, Yuko Onamura, Senior Economist in the Bank Group, and Emilio Raul Ortega, who is an independent consultant. So they will be on hand to help answer questions on specific issues arising from the discussion and the presentation. So now I would very much like to hand over to Christian, who is going to give us some opening remarks. So Christian, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks a lot. We really appreciate your support and also the support of socialprotection.org for today's event as we're launching our report and contribution to the debate. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. We're really delighted to be here today to present the report on innovations in public works. There is something really uniquely powerful about public works. They're much more than a paycheck. They bring people together for the work for a common good. They unite communities, they offer dignity, new skills, jobs in times of need, but also a path to a better future. Public works are unique because they protect people today, but with a view on tomorrow. They're a very popular tool of social policy because they activate the unemployed, they raise income and support communities. And that's one of the questions that was really at the core of this report. How do we make sure that public works deliver in a world of work that is rapidly changing in view of demographic shifts, the digital transformation, climate change and the green transition? Clearly, public works also must evolve. So I'd like to highlight three messages that come out of this report on jobs, on innovation, and on ambition. Now, jobs, to begin with, are the best way out of poverty, and public works have an important role to play in the toolkit on job creation. They help people gain skills and experience to find new jobs. They're an entry in the labor market for a lot of people who struggle to get into the labor market and find productive employment opportunities. Some of the programs offer childcare that free up women to work. Others teach better farming practices, deliver digital skills, etc. So when they're really linked to economic needs, they can really help people move forward. Secondly, on innovation. Innovation drives economic growth and human capital, fueled by people's creativity and determination to do better. Innovation allows public works to stay relevant and become more impactful for people. And that's really what the report puts forward. Some examples of innovation, shifting away from physical assets to services and digital solutions. Something around using smartphones to build community maps, to allow people to work remotely, environmental action to protect ecosystems as a foundation for then more sustainable jobs and livelihoods. Some programs introduce payment mechanisms that ensure that women have full control over their earnings. And what really matters most is that these creative solutions are being brought and put forward to protect people better. My final point for this report is on ambition. Innovation in programs are really about pushing boundaries and moving beyond the traditional focus of public works on low-skilled jobs and in infrastructure. They embrace today's challenges and are forward-looking. They're addressing obstacles that might prevent some groups from joining the labor market and public works programs. They focus on hands-on experience, allowing people to be more productive. So more programs should focus this approach of innovation to really realize the full potential of public works. Because at the end of the day, this innovation and ambition creates more diversity of offerings of public works, and diversity is one driver of scale, and scale is what is needed given the magnitude of challenges in labor markets globally today. So let me end with this and hand back to you, Anna, and I look forward to the presentation and to the discussion. Thank you very much to all of you, and including the panelists for weighing in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael, I'd now like to turn to you, Michael Weber, to present the key findings of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And thank you, Christian, for your opening remarks. I will certainly come back to your 3 points on jobs, innovation, and ambition. Many thanks also to socialprotection.org hosting us today for our report launch, with Anna being co-host of this informative series on public works. And a shout out also to our colleagues from ODI and ILO who have presented earlier in the series. Let me stress that while I'm presenting the report today, this is the result of a team effort. So big thanks to all co-authors and contributors. Many are connected today and will be available to respond to your questions later. I want us to start with some key facts about public works. Public works programs are widely used today, particularly in low and middle income countries. Over the past 10 years, more than 100 public work programs have been implemented. They vary in size and design. Many are national and some subnational. But importantly, 70% of these programs are in low and middle income countries, where they continue to play a central role in protecting people. Some of these are very large. To give you an idea, in India, the national program creates work opportunities for over 115 million beneficiaries in 1 year alone. And that's the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. In Ethiopia, the National Public Works Program benefits almost 8 million individuals per year. And that's the Productive Safety Net Program. Looking at public expenditures over the last decade in low-income countries, specifically public works programs accounted also for a large part of the social assistance spending, with 20% of all social assistance spending. So why are public works so popular? One reason is certainly that they can have several positive effects on people and communities. A public work program pays wages, thereby increasing household income and mitigating poverty, at least temporarily. Similarly, participants of public works gain work experience and skills, which can help them become more productive, and this is in turn good for the labor market. They create public assets, for example, small irrigation systems or roads that allow the community to farm better and move goods around, resulting in greater economic activity. Also, they have further positive externalities such as helping people's well-being, giving them purpose, or increasing social cohesion, all important topics for society. But the evidence on actual impacts in practice is quite mixed. So let's first look at wages. There is strong evidence that public works are effective in providing temporary relief. Participants and their households often see stable or higher earnings, supporting their consumption needs. However, sustained income gains are less common. Only a few studies show that impact on incomes extends beyond program duration. Then skills. The evidence on skills development is scarce. There are a few available studies that suggest weak or even no lasting effects on employability, a significant knowledge gap that needs to be addressed. This applies also to the assets generated by public works. To our surprise, we find that the evidence on welfare effects of public assets is scant. Some studies point to poor planning and maintenance challenges that prevent long-term benefits. Some of the few studies available even suggest elite capture. One of the latest studies on this was presented by our colleagues from ODI earlier in this series on socialprotection.org. It showed that public assets are in most cases a missed opportunity. Then externalities. As with skills and assets, the evidence on externalities such as social cohesion, women's empowerment, and psychological well-being remains limited. Only a few studies are available, some showing modest positive effects, some none. In practice, the full potential of public works is rarely tapped. And having said this, to be clear, we should not jump to the conclusion that public works do not protect people well or do not deliver benefits. No, but we do note that, one, many programs use conventional designs focused on low-skill infrastructure jobs and thus struggle to deliver their full potential adapted to our times. And two, there is a large gap in evaluations to better assess what works and what not. We know that the world is changing rapidly and global megatrends are reshaping the policy landscape, affecting social and economic policies for people and their jobs. Let's first consider demographic shifts. Populations are experiencing two contrasting trends: youth bulges in some areas and aging populations in others. This, of course, increases the need for more jobs for young people, but also for more care services for both children and the elderly. Next, digital transformation. Digital technologies are reshaping how people live, learn, and work. Digital skills are now essential for jobs and economic growth. And still, however, many people lack these skills. Also for governments, there is a lot of room left to leverage digital technologies and grow. Finally, climate change. More frequent and severe climate shocks are increasingly disrupting livelihoods, especially in vulnerable communities. This pushes countries to mitigate and adapt to climate shocks. At the same time, new opportunities for green jobs open up to help this mitigation adaptation efforts. So these key megatrends and other, for example, fiscal pressures, are shaping the policy environment and are a call for public works to adapt. To see how governments respond, our new World Bank report explores innovations in public works that show a path forward. It's guided by the three key questions that you see here on this slide. First, how do innovative approaches differ from conventional public work programs? Then, what are the main channels of innovation? And third, how do innovations improve the impact of public works programs? What we find is that while conventional models persist, a set of programs is introducing new design and delivery features. Innovation is happening both in first, what public works do, and second, how they do it. Three innovative approaches stand out and are the focus of our report. It's public works that provide care services or care providing public works that leverage digital technologies or digital public works, and public works that support climate and environmental goals, or green public work programs. Let me share some more on these one by one. So let's first turn to public works that provide care. These programs deliver childcare, elderly care, and home-based support. In many communities, these care services are hardly available and in practice limit women's ability to have a job. Care providing programs typically take two forms. Some offer care directly to participants, others provide services to a broader community. Let me make it more concrete with some of the programs we explored. For example, in Burkina Faso, the labor-intensive public works program introduced mobile childcare, or also called mobile crèche, right next to its work sites. Women could drop off their children in the morning and head to work on conventional assignments such as maintenance work on roads and public spaces, or they could choose to work as caregivers within that very program. This created a whole new childcare workstream while making it much easier for mothers to have a job. There is also an interesting example, variation of care providing public works for Rwanda, that Maurice, one of our panelists, will expand on later. But do let me also mention another care providing public works program in South Africa, which is called the Expanded Public Works Program. It also provides care, but extends it to people with chronic illnesses, including HIV/AIDS, care for orphans, the elderly, and persons with disabilities. It's an important example of how public works can create meaningful work while filling critical gaps in community care. The positive impacts of these programs are manifold. First of all, clearly these programs increase care provision. Then they can reduce the care burden for women and increase their chances of paid work. Plus, they provide new skills, important skills. Participants receive basic caregiving training that help future employability. And early evidence indicates also positive results. For example, the program in Burkina Faso not only increases women's earnings, but also improves early childhood development, a finding that is also confirmed for other programs, including the program for Rwanda, of which we will hear later. Let us turn to digital public works. These use digital technology not just to change how programs are implemented, but also offer entirely new types of works and create new types of assets. Typically, participants use their own devices to remotely complete digital assignments, such as marking roads and buildings on aerial images, for example, or mapping points of interest, such as water fountains or waste disposal sites. They typically also provide quite flexible work schedules for the participants, which is a big plus. Let me share a few of the examples we looked at. In, for example, Kenya, Mali, and Tanzania, small-scale pilots engaged some 1,300 young people who used mobile devices to create valuable geospatial datasets. They brought together information about, for example, green spaces in cities, the height of buildings, or simple infrastructure, all in digital format, providing inputs for urban planning and other community service of the municipality. On this, we will soon hear more from the mayor of Freetown, Yvonne, who will tell us more about the digital public works activities in Freetown, in Sierra Leone. Also, in our report, we share many other fascinating public and private sector examples. Some have focused on digitizing land registry or court filings. Others engaged low-income rural workers and women in urban slums in simple digital tasks to train AI models in their own local languages. In our analysis, we find that digital public works have 4 key impacts. They can expand to important target groups that are not well covered by conventional programs. Remote flexible tasks make it easier for women, young people, and people with limited mobility to participate. This includes also people in conflict or violence-affected settings, the famous FCV, where mobility, for example, is one of the key concerns. Then they create valuable digital assets that help modernize government services. Of course, participants also build digital skills that are essential in the digital economy. Plus, these digital public works improve efficiency and quality checks, given more transparent and performance-based digital management tools. So much on digital public works. And now let's turn to the third area of innovation, green public works programs, which address environmental and climate challenges. For example, they can restore degraded ecosystems after deforestation or intense flooding, or improve land and water management and reduce natural disaster risk. Some of the green programs we explore are long-standing programs that gradually added green features, and these features ended up being core to the public works program. This includes the two of the largest public works programs in the world that I mentioned at the beginning, the Indian program and the Ethiopian national program. They both integrated climate and environmental objectives over time and evolved. In the report, you will find several further examples, including very recent ones that show how countries are designing green public works programs. This includes the case of Malawi, and we are lucky to have Kate with us today, who will discuss Malawi's climate-smart enhanced public works. So also coming here to the impacts. What are the key impacts of green public works? So, well, they first of all have positive environmental impacts. They improve, for example, groundwater recharge and increased soil fertility, for example, in India and Ethiopia. They offer participants new skills in environmental management, water conservation, land restoration, skills that support livelihoods and also improve the use of resources. In Ethiopia, for instance, there is evidence that the national program, the National Public Works Program activities raised agricultural productivity. Most importantly, green public works help build resilience by reducing erosion, managing water more effectively, and restoring protective ecosystems. They lower vulnerabilities, thereby to hazards such as droughts, floods, and land degradation. Last but not least, these programs create durable environmental assets. The benefits extend well beyond participants, delivering lasting benefits that strengthen entire communities. So let's zoom out and consider why and how these public works and these innovations make the programs better. First, the innovations can make public works more adaptive. They expand what public works can do and how they do it, providing new types of work, assets, and services. This allows programs to better align with community needs and national priorities. Then second, innovations can make public works more inclusive. New types of tasks, especially care and digital work, lower participation barriers and offer flexible, remote options. This brings in women, young people, and those with mobility restriction, all groups that conventional programs can often not reach. Therefore, these target groups can benefit from more equity and social assistance coverage. Third, innovations can make public works more relevant. Thinking of jobs, they can build skills in areas where labor demand is growing. Think of care, digital, and green jobs. Fourth, innovations can make public works more strategic. How? Well, they link social protection more directly to broader development priorities and national strategies. And overall, the innovations can make public works much more cost-effective by enhancing coverage and deliver more lasting benefits. From what we see, innovative programs can offer a better return on investment compared to conventional programs that focus on short-term income support alone. So let me slowly close by looking ahead. First, a reality check. Innovations show promise, but they also introduce new challenges, and we should be aware of that. Two aspects are key. One, they might be more complex in their design and thus require stronger coordination and technical capacity. Two, evidence on innovative programs remains limited, but compared to conventional programs, it is steadily growing. It it's for us a call to keep evaluating and learning from these programs, especially the new ones, the innovative ones also. Second, conventional public works programs continue to matter, of course. In many contexts, such as post-disaster recovery or in face of large-scale unemployment, traditional models can be a good fit. But most importantly, conventional programs can evolve and do evolve as they integrate innovative features. In fact, some national programs are starting to introduce childcare or for more flexible work schedules. Others introduce gender-smart adaptations. These can make conventional approaches more inclusive and responsive. In summary, and coming back to the 3 points Christian raised early on, innovations point to a more impactful future, where they can realize their full potential. How can they do this? First, by improving how protection is provided, especially to often underrepresented groups. By focusing on skills and jobs that empower people and provide a pathway out of poverty and towards growth. And by becoming more ambitious and addressing key development challenges of our time. This includes the mentioned demographic shifts, digital transformation, and climate change. In other words, the new generation of public works programs can improve how social policy is implemented while supporting economic development that is inclusive, sustainable, and jobs focused. You will find many more details and examples on these points in our report, a report that would not have been possible without a fantastic really team effort. Here on this slide, you can see the team of authors, and I want to thank Marco, Anna, Alessandra, Ite, Jonathan, Yuko, Cecilia, Emilio, and Samuel for all their contributions. There are also many further colleagues from the World Bank and our counterparts in the governments that have provided important inputs. We acknowledge them in our report, and these inputs range from case study examples to feedback on our findings and critical assessments of innovations. A big thank you to all of them, and over to you, Anna, and our panelists.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that really fascinating, excellent summary of the report. I hope that's whetted people's appetite to go in and look at it in more detail. But now I'm delighted that we actually have 3 colleagues with us who are going to talk about their own practical experience of introducing some of these innovations in their own national programs. And first of all, I'd like to invite Mr. Morris Sibabaruta to speak with us. Morris is going to share his experiences on the integration of childcare into the National Public Works programme in Rwanda. And Morris is the Division Manager for Community Development and Strategy in the Coordination Division in LODA. Many of you will be familiar with LODA, who manages the National Public Works programme, the VUP, in Rwanda. So Morris, I'd just like to invite you to tell us very briefly about the childcare programme in Rwanda. And I'd like to apologise in advance to Maurice and to our participants online, because I'm afraid we've only been able to give our panellists a few minutes to talk about their programmes. So please take this as an introduction to each of the programmes you're going to hear about, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions and raise further issues with Maurice and the other panellists using the Q&A facility. So if you want to know more about particular things that Maurice is sharing, please do make sure that you put them in the Q&A, and then we can come back to Maurice later and explore those issues. But to start with, Maurice, could you just spend a few minutes telling us about the childcare programme in Rwanda? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. I would like to appreciate the team that has organized this webinar to share experience. And Rwanda, through its vision in 2050, aims to reach upper middle income status by 2035 and high income status in 2050. So in the spirit to leave no one behind, Rwanda invested in social protection for the vulnerable or poor and disadvantaged groups, including women and persons with disability. So in terms of creating jobs for the poor, for their livelihood improvement, via regular income support, public works was designed as one of the components under Vision Umurenge program. That is a flagship program for social protection in Rwanda to benefit households in poverty, but with labor capacities. This was started in a form of labor-intensive public works, considering recipients with labor capacities, but on realizing that some of the households in need of employment opportunities would not benefit due to caring responsibilities or being constrained by physical vulnerabilities. So we thought of the flexible public works. The public works we had, it was classic. Now we moved it to expanded, another subcomponent, expanded or flexible public works, so to give a chance to household people with caring responsibilities or constrained by labor capacities. So this was designed and it provided access to job opportunities to this specific group. Thereafter, to care for the young children with mothers at work, so that have gone for expanded public works, we thought of how to care for these young children so that we can work on their education and different pillars of early childhood development. So the service-based expanded public works was introduced, and that is the child care or care services for inclusion of the caregivers at the home-based ECDs. It concurrently solved the issue of jobs opportunities for the women and also solving the issue of lack of the infrastructures, the ECD, early childhood development centers at the community level. So the caregivers were attached to the home-based ECDs to care for the children at the community level in their home-based ECDs. And that was done, organized by the community. And this has progressively capacitated these people to acquire skills in the care economy, and they acquired knowledge worth in this care domain. So this is how the care economy was introduced, the caregivers, and nowadays they are working under the public works, but in this kind of skilled pathway, and they are receiving their regular wages, but they are being capacitated with skills that are relevant for these young children under care to develop throughout these different pillars of early childhood development. So maybe I should explain more if time allows, or in case there are more reflections or questions from the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maurice. That was a fascinating taste of the innovations in Rwanda. I'm sure we'll be coming back to that. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr, OBE, who is the mayor of Freetown in Sierra Leone, and she's going to tell us about digital public works. Yvonne, would you kindly tell us briefly, tell us a little bit about the digital program in your country? And again, apologies for just giving you a couple of minutes, but if you could just make this an introduction, we'll come back and discuss it in more detail. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you to the World Bank team for creating this opportunity for us to share experiences. And I think going back to the report that was presented earlier, one of the things that strikes me as being important when they talked about the assets being sort of surviving beyond the project is really sort of the motive and how these things are designed. So you say digital public works, but it didn't start as that. It started as actually a response to a designed need, which really brings together both the digital and the climate aspects. So we have an initiative known as Freetown the Tree Town, which is a commitment initially to plant 1 million trees in order for us to address the reforestation challenge. And in doing so, stabilize slopes, reduce temperatures, and protect water catchments, etc. But our slogan is that we don't just plant trees, we grow trees. And in order for you to grow trees, you need to be able to track trees. So our digital public works really came about in a very deliberate way. So the asset then is sustained because it was thought through. It was the end goal. The use of the digital public works scheme is addressing the fact that 70% of our population in the city are under the age of 35. And 70% of those are themselves unemployed or underemployed. So there's a big need right there. So it's bringing in the relevant pieces. So how does it work? This is part of a collective. This is part of a collective where the trees are planted under one scheme. Partly actually, in some ways there may be similar funding, but most importantly, the tracking now it goes hand in glove, and the skills that are being designed, the skills that are being given to the young people, the digital skills, they're using their phones to tag each and every single tree that is planted. And I've been with these young people as they've shown me with great pride how they're linking into this digital platform. So each tree is tagged, each tree is tracked, and then they are paid based on the number of trees that they track. They have a base number of trees, and they're offered a bonus if they go beyond that base. So there's incentive, there is training, not just on the digital app, but also on community engagement, on climate change modules. And importantly, I think, because of the manner in which this is designed and because of its genesis, there is that sustainability. So that is one example. We have a number, but as you've made the point that time is in short supply, I'll leave it at that. But just to say, this model of using the app, working across the city in our planting areas is also applied with community engagement around sanitation. And there are a couple of other examples. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. That's really fascinating. I love the idea that you don't just plant trees, you grow them. I mean, I think that's worthy of a whole discussion as well. Thank you. That's really, really interesting. And we will come back and ask you more about other work that you're doing. But thank you for that to start us off. And may I invite the audience to please do put your questions to the presenters and the panelists in the Q&A column. I'm sure you have many things to ask Maurice and Yvonne. But now I'd like to invite Kate Jane Langway from Malawi to tell us about Climate Smart Public Works programming. Kate is the Director of Planning for Poverty Reduction and Social Protection in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs in Malawi. So Kate, I'd like to give you the floor. Please, could you tell us a little bit about the Climate Smart Enhanced Public Works program in Malawi?
Thank you, Anna. The Public Works program in Malawi is specifically named Climate Smart Enhanced Public Works. Climate Smart because the idea behind it is twofold. While it's there to support the ultra-poor households with labor capacity, it's also supposed to serve in promoting the environmental restoration at the community level. So we can see this program is twofold. And to date, this program has got a coverage of 520,000 households. That's 520,000 participants that are working under this program, and they get around $28 per 30-day working cycle. So as I said, the motivation behind this program is first to improve the natural resource conservation through integrated watershed management and better asset outcomes. At the same time, it's there to save the issues of household resilience by providing food security and enhancing income generating opportunities. So it helps to provide consumption support to the poor beneficiary household, those who have labor capacity. And at the same time, this program has got modernized program delivery systems, which we use electronic payments to the beneficiaries. That also helps them to bring them in the financial inclusion. The distinct features of this program are that we are using the integrated catchment management approach. That is, we follow the Malawi national guidelines on the integrated catchment management and rural infrastructure. Being the climate smart initiative, it's helping us to inform, and it's informed by the national experience and international best practices. It's also promoting the gender and youth inclusion, because most of the larger proportion of the participants in this program are women and the youth. So it's giving them that inclusion to build their resilience at the household level. And I said at the same time, it's also working to help us in the conservation of the environment, as we know that currently globally we are going through climate shocks. So it's a program which is also saving us to make sure that we are mitigating these climate shocks at the community level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Kate. I think it's really interesting how your public works program is integrated with the national guidelines on environmental conservation and watershed management. That's really fascinating. I'm sure we'll want to hear more about that. But now I'd like to return to Maurice. Maurice, we wanted to put a second question to all the panelists, asking about how the innovations have impacted on skills and jobs. Because that's really the focus of this report. To what extent can public works programs both create employment directly, but also enhance jobs and skills? So Maurice, may I invite you to share with us a few words about your experiences of skills development in relation to the childcare program in Rwanda? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, for the good question. How the public works worked on skills development of the people in the program. The caregivers are certainly trained to know and consider the 5 pillars of early childhood development, and they have been at the center of children's readiness for schooling. So this is the skill that they wouldn't have acquired if they hadn't been enrolled in this child care service. They rejoice to have gotten permanent jobs. That is very important, so that they could gain their monthly wages from which they earn a living. They rejoice of growing capacities that would necessarily benefit them even in their future in this care service. For many caregivers at home-based ECD, expanded public works child care skills have become an entry to child care market. So they testify that this is like an entry point for the potentials in the near future. One of the caregivers in one of the districts in the northern province of Rwanda said, I quote, "Through home-based ECD program, I gained professional skills in child care, early stimulation, and nutrition. These skills have improved my family's well-being first, allowed me to support parents and children across the community, and continue to create lasting positive change." End of quote. This is an evidence that in terms of job creation, This is something that is being done, especially women and youth. They are at, when we consider all the total of 36,000 caregivers we have, 73.3% are women that are employed, while the youth are at 80.80%. And then among the youth, again, the female are at the level of 78.4%. So care providing public works became a response to issues the women used to encounter due to these child care responsibilities that would prevent them to go for jobs to maximize their potentials in terms of gaining their daily living, which would to some extent exclude them from the employment opportunities. Again, this boosted early childhood development to benefit the youth as well as the mothers, something that could not have been met in a normal or ordinary way of child care at an individual household level. So this also provide they provide the community care, they build care specific skills and enable women to go for work and maximize production. In a real sense, the adapted public works has significantly demonstrated commendable impact as earlier presented by Mr. Michael. The supply of care service, that is a skill that would not have been met. It has reduced care burden for women, for them to significantly participate in paid work, but it's also providing the caregiving skills as explained. Then there is an evidence that women's earnings are increasing at the community level. So generally, by adapting the public works to become more inclusive, more women and youth have benefited not only by acquiring monthly wages, but also gaining skills potential to contemporary labor market by the diversification of employment pathways. So this is one of the critical pathway that is potential in our future. But most importantly, the caregivers have built their self-esteem and the confidence due to the trust by the community they serve, and they remain reliable contributors to human capital development agenda as an assured better future. So any other question, I feel free to post it, and then I would react on that. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for that, Maurice. I think we appreciate those impacts on the women caregivers particularly. Thank you. Yvonne, may I now invite you to consider the same question? I mean, can you tell us about how these innovations have actually had an impact on skills and jobs, particularly for women and young people?
I think just building on what I said earlier on, the very fact that these jobs are available, I know that there are those who think, well, these are short-term jobs. Is this really a long-term future? And I saw with the report again, the assessment that many of these are temporary, that the improvement in income is temporary. But what we've seen is that this has really been a building block. It's been a stepping stone, and that, the provision of skills which are transferable, literally the ability to go through a short training program where you're being exposed to simple digital skills, where you're interfacing with dashboards, where you're learning about climate change, builds confidence. I think one of the things that was mentioned, which I would want to just highlight, is that sense of purpose. I've come across graduates who have been out of the job market, unable to access a job since they finished university, north of 2, 3, 4 years. And then through this Digital Public Works program have really just regained that sense of purpose. So I think that's a soft attribute or a soft asset, which shouldn't be ignored. It's very important in terms of what it enables people to do beyond, but also very practically, when encouraged to do so, and when encouraged to channel those funds to something very specific, whether it's additional education or in small investment into a small business. This is another way in which the digital public works are a stepping stone. And because the digital economy is so critical to life skills today, to engagement in the market, I think, using this as a platform for providing these work opportunities, linking it to the digital economy, linking it to digital skills, has really been beneficial. With respect to women, and because our population or our constituents are predominantly youth, almost over 100 and over 90% youth. But with respect to women within that, we've been very deliberate, and we have tried to ensure that we get as much as 40% of these workers being female. Now, this also is very significant because when it comes to the digital space, we've seen this in other areas. When we first began to do our tree tracking, one of the challenges we found with making sure we got a female participation was the fact that many women don't have access to mobile phones, to Android phones, because of the disproportion or the disadvantages that are sort of built into their lives already. Again, this is an opportunity because you can say to someone, well, you're going to get paid, and you can therefore get the phone knowing that you'll be able to pay for it at the end of your first month. So it's actually opened up opportunities and opened up the market and exposed more women. So all in all, I'd say that, as a process or as a system, the benefits are enormous. I continue to be of the opinion that you should have the horse in front of the cart and not the cart in front of the horse. So when it comes to what it is you're doing in that digital public space, it really must be grounded in outcomes which are integrated into your overall, in our case, city planning. So we have Freetown to Treetown, and all of these opportunities are linked back to something which has direction and which has longevity. Because for all of these trackers, they are participating now in the carbon market accreditation process that the city is going through. So it's also that sense of being part of something much bigger, and something that goes beyond them. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much for that, Yvonne. Fascinating. Particularly, in terms of the links to carbon market accreditation and monitoring impacts, I think that's really important. But before we hand over for more questions, I'd like to invite Kate, to talk about her experience of the impact of these innovations on skills and jobs in Malawi. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you so much. The impact, I think it's more or less like what the previous speakers have said. As I said in my area presentation, this climate smart we have 500,000 households, and out of that, 45%, that's about 230,000 women, and then about 37% are the youth. And in terms of creating jobs and skills for this grouping, I think the job is the climate smart public works participation is creating a job in itself. Though it's a temporary assignment, but it's giving them something at the meantime. At the same time, it's also equipping the beneficiaries with some skills in the environmental conservation. It is helping them to learn how to build swales, to do check dams, and to protect the land. And in so doing, they are able to replicate the same in their fields. And on top of that, through this, with these beneficiaries, we also link them to other groupings, where they learn some small business skills. We also encourage them in the saving culture as we link them to savings and loans groups, and this, they learn some other skills like irrigation, climate smart agriculture, which when they're equipped with that, knowing that their participation in program is temporary, it serves as a stepping stone that afterwards, when they graduate, they can use that those skills in their own fields, or even developing their own small businesses and move on from being beneficiaries of these programs. So it's really helping them a lot, and it's giving them that resilience, it's building that resilience that we really wanted at the onset of this program. So in doing that, it's helping us even graduating some participants from the program and enrolling new ones, so that after we build their resilience, we give them we capacitate them with some skills, then they can move on and do things on their own. So the evidence is really there. I think I shared even in some, we have some publications which we can share with the public if they need it, to showcase that the beneficiaries are really benefiting a lot, and it's making impact not only on the climate but even in the households in terms of creating jobs and enhancing some skills which can help them to build their lives beyond the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kate. I think that's interesting. Thank you to all our panelists for their responses to those questions. And I think we've got some themes emerging in the questions that are coming up, which relate right the way across these presentations. One key issue seems to be, what impact is there beyond the direct employment impact? I mean, obviously, in terms of social protection, the direct employment impact is critical. But as Michael mentioned earlier, there's also this interest in actually creating skills in order to have sustained benefits in the labour market. And I think perhaps what we're hearing is that these are emerging programmes, and we're still looking for evidence of the ongoing impacts. Perhaps things like tracer studies are yet to be implemented to look at the ongoing impacts in terms of labour market performance. But then you would expect that if these are new programmes. So let me pick out one of the questions which really asks about this. It's from Mariana Roa, Duke of Edinburgh Foundation. She asks, and she's pointing this question to Marco. She says, I'm interested in the evidence on impact you shared. Why do you think, what has the team found on why evidence in skills remains scarce or weak with no lasting impacts in employability? And I think this is really a key question, and it was one of the findings in this report. So Marco, would be very interested to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anna, and thank you, Mariana, for the great question. Indeed, so it's one of the points that we discuss in the report in the opening chapter, and it's also one of the issues that kind of surprised us as well when we were doing the research. So briefly, there's no easy answer, but there are 2 points that we make in the report and that I want to convey here. So one is that there are methodological challenges of assessing the impacts of skills. So you need long-term follow-up studies, surveys, and so on. So I think not much of the research community has focused on that, and we know that. And two is that many of the kind of conventional public works programs have both weak training components, or they develop skills that are not directly relevant for the local labor market. And this is one of the messages, is that public works, if they want to have an impact on skills and employability, they need to relate to something that the local labor market requires. So that's an important message from there. And over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Marco. I mean, I think this has been identified over the decades as a major shortcoming because very few programs actually look at the medium to long-term labour market impacts. So I think it's one of those issues that was really raised in the introduction as something that we need to think about when we're appraising the impact of these programs, going beyond the immediate, the short-term impacts. But yeah, great question. Thank you. And thank you, Marco, for your response. There's a question from Miravola Randria, who says, could the panelists talk more about the challenges that the innovations introduce? Are these associated with the ability of countries to implement them? What about issues to do with quality assurance, technical obstacles? I would be curious to understand this better. So here the question is really about the challenges that our panelists face in introducing these innovations. And I don't know if one particular panelist would like to respond, or shall I, perhaps I could nominate someone. Yvonne, would you be willing to just spend a minute or two telling us about some of the challenges that you faced in the programme? Sorry to put you on the spot there. And then we'll come to Maurice. Okay, Maurice, maybe you would like to start. Could we hear about some of the challenges that you faced when you are introducing innovations in a programme that you may already be being challenged to implement, to expand? How do you accommodate these kind of innovations? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Thank you so much, Anna. It is an interesting question. The challenges as we introduce this innovation, of course, many of the innovations, they have to come with some challenges we needed to anticipate, but also looking into how we could mitigate. One of the challenges, I can name 4 challenges. One was the fact that having introduced that child care and the package that was in place could not cover all the villages, all the territories, all the communities that were in need of these public works or child care services vis-a-vis the coverage. That was one. But of course, we started by pilot. We embarked on a pilot, so we managed to work on that. Then we'll be progressively scaling this up. In number 2, the issue we encountered is the materials like play materials that are worth for the children's development, but also the comprehensive curriculum. But the curriculum, when we started in a form of community approach or unconventional, starting to work on some of the pillars of early childhood development, but with the partners and the investment in the curriculum, we managed to develop the comprehensive curriculum with the institutions that are responsible, and that is harmonized. And what is remaining is that scale up, ensure that all the centers have the relevant and updated curriculum. Number 3, as it started with the community approach, of course, there is an issue of standardization. This standardization became an issue because of these people that they did not have the full capacities to work on different pillars in as far as early childhood development is concerned. And in view of the fact that some of the centers were maybe chosen at the community level by volunteering, so we continued working on the quality of infrastructures of these homes, the ECD centers. So it's a challenge, but we are working on it, and there is a tangible progress. The other one was the capacity to cater for all the caregivers, including those ones that were selected at the community level, starting as volunteers. But as a response, there is an involvement of the community coming together since they have found solutions to the issues they had, for them to maximize their productivity. So they started contributing so that the caregivers could provide maybe nutrition commodities to the children at the centers, but also with in our programs.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
Maurice, for talking us through those challenges. I think it's really useful to divide them up like that and to see this issue. I think it would be nice to hear about some of the challenges in relation to the digital program, because that's something which it's new to many of us. And I think many people will have questions, and we actually have a question from our colleague. The question from Miravola. She's asking about the challenges associated with implementation. And I wonder if my colleague Jonathan, who also, or Marco, who worked on the digital chapter, could just share some of the headlines in terms of the challenges faced in implementing these kind of programs. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Anna, and thanks for the great question again. So, Jonathan, if at any point you want to complement, please jump in. So, a few things that we identify in the report, in the part that deals with digital public works. So, obviously, like there are some contextual challenges. So although there is widespread use of smartphones and internet access is pretty much sorted in urban centers, it's still a challenge in specific areas or in more urban, remote areas that digital public works could actually breach to. So that's one concern. The second is, of course, the technical expertise challenge. So to set up platforms where you can effectively and reliably distribute digital tasks across time. It could be a challenge in certain contexts, for sure. So there could be some high upfront costs associated with that. And then the final and the perhaps more interesting challenge is, and here Mayor Yvonne could have said something to it, is that we have to find digital assets that can accommodate a program that lasts for longer. So they have to be of a certain size, or the work that people do needs to be able to build over a longer period of time. So you can certainly do digital maps for a shorter period with a more modest amount of participants. But if you're considering like a larger scale program, then what kind of digital assets you might want to work with? That's a question to answer. Thank you. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Jonathan. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to that. I mean, if not, let's go on to Kate. I mean, Kate, can you tell us about some of the challenges that you faced in implementing a green program? What did you find to be distinctive issues that were challenging? And perhaps if Kate's not there, Emilio, who co-authored that chapter, might like to say a few words on the challenges of green public works. Not sure if we have connectivity with Kate or Emilio at the moment. Kate, yes, lovely.
Yes. Mainly the challenges that we met in implementing this program, they were mainly to do with the issue of targeting and, of course, the payment. The targeting of the selection of these beneficiaries is done using the Malawi Social Registry. So most of the times the beneficiaries could not understand the criteria that we are using in selecting these beneficiaries, and sometimes at some point, especially on the onset, we used to have the problem with our data in this registry, because most of it was a bit outdated. So we ended up selecting the wrong beneficiaries, despite that the selection process is very participatory, but despite that we still had some challenges in getting the right beneficiaries. Suffice to say, now most of that has been resolved. But then with that problems at targeting, it ended up delaying even the implementation phase of that. And then another problem that we had was to do with the payments, especially when you introduced the e-payment, because it turned out that sometimes the beneficiary who registered, who we selected as a beneficiary in the household, they ended up that at the time of payment or at the time of working, it will be another member of the household working. So when you come to pay, you find that the name which you are being given to pay is not the same one it's different from the one you selected. So that also caused some delays in the payment because we had to verify to make sure the right person. So these are the problems that we made, but now most of these have been resolved. Another issue is that being the e-payment, we also required that we verify the beneficiaries using their IDs. So it happened that sometimes when you start paying, you find when you do start doing the KYC, you find that some of the beneficiaries, they don't have the IDs. That also gave us some delays in the payments. But most of these problems have now been resolved. Of course, we can't run away, being that we are dealing with a lot of people, and most of them, they have the low level of education. For you to train them to make sure that they understand what you're saying and what you need them to do, it takes time. So we still have some problems here and there, but small pockets. But comparing with the what we are facing when we initially just started the program, I think there is a lot of improvement, and we are still working on improving, because like on the e-payment, we had to select for them, for the beneficiaries, the mode of payment, the service provider that we have to use for them. But now we are embarking on a choice model where the beneficiaries have to choose the service provider who is available in their community for ease of access of the transfers. So these are the issues that we have made, but I'm glad to say that most of these we have now resolved, and we keep on improving on the system to make sure that it's seamless. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for those. And I think in addition to the implementation challenges, it would be interesting if you could tell us about any challenges in trying to integrate your national program in Malawi with the National Watershed Program, because I think one of the key issues in Green Public Works is integrating the Public Works Program with national climate priorities. So Kate, could you tell us a little bit about how you integrated the Public Works with the climate and watershed priorities?
Yeah, on that, I think you have to understand that much as this is the social protection program, but this is also the program which intersects across a lot of the sectors. So for us to make sure that we are doing the right thing, we have the committees from the central office up to the village level, and in these committees we integrate the expertise from different sectors. Mainly for guidance, we need the missile plans, the water, the climate change people to come together and to make sure that as we are identifying the catchment areas, we are doing the right thing and we are following the national guidelines as they are stipulated, to make sure that what we are doing is not something is in isolation, but it's in line with what is already there as the guidelines. So with that, it really helped us to make sure that as we are identifying the catchment areas to work on this program, we have something which we know that at the end of the day to bring us the impact that we need, especially on the environment conservation. So to surmount that, what we did is to make sure that we integrate all the necessary expertise from across the different sectors, so that we are guided and we are operating under the acceptable guidelines in the environmental and climate sector. I hope I've answered your question correctly. The key is to integrate everybody in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people wanting to follow up with you and ask about your experience, how you managed to do that. We have an interesting question. in Michael's presentation, we heard that there was an issue about, sorry, this is a question from David Alzate. He says, what gives the bank confidence that the next generation of public works will be cost effective, given the muted or negative evidence about traditional public works? And I think this question of cost effectiveness is particularly relevant in this context where development assistance is declining. Governments are having to ask themselves questions about what their priorities are in the absence of external financing. And so cost effectiveness, I think, is important in public works in a way that it never has been before. You know, it's really moved up the agenda. And I think it will be interesting just to hear some reflections on the relative costs of these different kinds of programs. And I know it's something that we tried to address in the paper, but actually there was quite limited evidence. So we were somewhat challenged in this. But Michael, would you like to sort of share your reflections on that, or perhaps nominate a colleague to reflect on that? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I can start and others can come in, but it's indeed a very important question and a question that also explains some of the frustration with conventional public works that in many cases are not cost effective. And there are better ways oftentimes if the only goal is to provide income support. There are, for example, cash transfers programs that may be more effective if that is the only goal. But then if we go beyond that goal and also think about many of the additional important aspects that I mentioned, including skills development, employability increases going forward, and social cohesion type of goals, community building, and delivering on the challenges that we face in our time, then I think that the innovations that we have seen and see so far do indeed have a potential by enhancing the coverage. And I responded to David in the Q&A's chat by also providing these more lasting benefits, not just a short-term benefit in terms of income support. Then there's this important aspect of more transparency, giving the digital technologies, digital tools that can be used for supervision, for tracking, for measuring performance, and for providing feedback, both to the programs, but also to the participants of the programs itself, so the management of the programs and the beneficiaries. So we have more on that in the report. I see Maurice also wants to come in, so I'll pass over to him, and maybe also others have something to share from their respective innovative areas.
Thank you so much, Michael. I have realized that there are interesting questions in the chat box. Francesco asked whether we have empirical evidences that there is an overall impact of public works and of the role of this specific feature related to child care. Of recently, when we conducted in Rwanda the ACV, the study that shows the livelihood status of different households, it has been evidenced that the VUP, Vision Umurenge program, in which we implement these components of classic public works, expanded public works, coupled with skills training and livelihood assets and so on. They are all embedded in our VUP program. It has been evidenced that the VUP has significantly impacted on the eradication of extreme poverty, and whereby we realized that within the targeted participants of VUP, only 40% were still in poverty. So there is an evidence, and currently we are finalizing the VUP impact evaluation. It is to be published by end of June. The progress is good. And whether there is an impact in as far as child care is concerned, something I would share with you is that since we started, from the time we started implementing child care, enrolling the caregivers, there were a lot of children who could go to primary having not attended the nurseries, the childhood development, which would impact on the human capital. But currently, as per the data we have, with that introduction of child care, working on different components, pillars of child development, So we managed to reduce malnutrition from 38% to 25 in 2024. We still have a long way to go, but the ECDs have significantly contributed because we provide them with a nutritious commodities that are served at a community level, especially to these children in the ECDs. Then there is cooking demonstration for the mothers. The mothers are taught about hygiene and so on, and the parenting. So, and it has also worked on reduction of poverty, I said. Something again that I would share with you, something that was asked by Jeremy, that the caregivers are building communities and that they demonstrate individual dignity, but that's there is no evidence. You are very right, because we haven't gone far in implementing the this child care, because we are like fifth year, but the study is ongoing, as I said, and we hope that there will be more evidences. But what is visible is that these people that were considered as poor a long time, some time back, currently they are people who could be trusted, that they can take care of the children of their neighbors. This is a trust. It is something that is very important, even for them to be given more responsibilities, because they have become capable. They have demonstrated that they are capable. They can be trusted, taking care of the neighbors, the children, and so on. But of course, we need that study to provide a scientific evidence.
Maurice, may I stop you there,
yes.
Maurice? Because I think we've got time for just one more question. So I think your point is very well taken about the need for more evidence. And I think typically if we look at the evaluation of public works programs, they look at throughput, they look at input indicators, output indicators, how many people employed, how many days of employment created, how many children in ECD programs. But actually, we need to be looking at the impact on livelihoods, on employment. We need to be looking at the nature of assets created over time. And I think that's perhaps one of the key learning points. And this is where this session matches nicely with the earlier ODI one, saying that we really need to be rethinking how we evaluate public works programs. We need to move away from these kind of RCTs and very much quantitative focused evaluations to do more qualitative ones. And I think that would address the issue that Maurice is talking about and that Jeremy alluded to, really looking at what the impact at community level. So I think there's very real challenges there. We need to be changing our M&E protocols at the same time as we're changing the content of the programs. I think we've got time perhaps for one last question. We've had marvelous questions and great responses. So thank you to our contributors. A question on, oh, here we've got Victoria Strokova has said we need to be focusing on evidence. Yes, very much. But we had one question about engagement of the private sector. And this is very interesting. As we said, there's going to be less ODA available. Nationally available resources are going to be constrained, particularly as climate impacts start to bite into national GDP. So there could be a greater role for the private sector potentially, and many people are starting to think about this. So Marco, you've responded to this online, but I don't know if any other colleagues would like to just say a few words about the role of the private sector, or if Marco, you'd like to just sort of summarize how you see philanthropies in the private sector. And I think I can only give you 1 minute because this session will automatically cut off at 12:30. So may I give you just 1 minute to say something
wow.
about this?
Okay, that's a huge responsibility. So yeah, very briefly. So 2 points. I've responded in writing, but nice to say here as well. So one is that yes, we've seen with digital programs, for example, because of the demand of very specific expertise and also tools in some cases, there is an involvement of the private sector, either as providers of, for example, like some specific services. There was geospatial mapping, for example, involved in Kenya. or digital platforms as well that are used to distribute work. So that's on that side. Then we also bring into the report a few non-governmental examples that are very similar to the public works innovations that we otherwise see governments do. And there we have initiatives from India that work also on training AI
Marco, I'm
models
sorry,
in local
I'm going to be
languages
very
and so
rude
on. So,
and interrupt here, but please may I refer people to Marco's answer in the chat, in the Q&A. This is
and the
addressed
report,
somewhat in the report. Thank you to everybody. This session automatically cuts off at past, so I just want to thank Maurice, Yvonne and Kate very much for sharing their experiences. Thank you to Michael and Christian for their introductory remarks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.